Hello and welcome back to Collaborate Virtual. A big thanks to Chris Richards for his talk, The Evolution of Convenience this morning. And a big thanks to our sponsors, Balsamiq and CX by Design. A bit later on this afternoon at 3 p.m. UK time, we'll be back with Jim Kalbach, Chief Evangelist of Mural, with his talk, Jobs to be Done, a Design Language for Collaboration. Up next, though, we have Nomensa's Head of Experience Delivery, Hannah Tempest, with her talk, Designing for Burnout. In this talk, Hannah will share some insights from UX and design professionals in the industry on how they've coped, as well as discussing how we can better design systems and tools to support people with feelings of burnout. As always, please say hello to everyone in the chat. Make sure your chat settings are switched to panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your messages. And let us know there if there's any issues with the stream or audio or anything like that. Please do also ask lots of questions using the Q&A function, and I will get through as many as those as I can with Hannah at the end. Finally, we're using auto-generated captions. Whilst they might not be 100% accurate live, when we share these talks publicly on our YouTube channel, we will ensure the transcripts are accurate. So without further ado, I will hand over to Hannah.
Thank you. Thanks, Henry. Hello, so thank you for taking the time to join me either live or later. So this last year has been difficult for so many reasons, and as we've been working on large scale projects and I've been working with my team, this word keeps coming up again and again about burnout, feelings of burnout, whether we're close to burnout, and I wanted to look at it with a designer's lens and see if this issue in some ways, this is a bit of therapy for myself, I'm sure, but I want to know whether these feelings of depletion amongst the clients and amongst my team, whether we can use the tools within UX, the tools within design and design thinking to perhaps start to solve some of these things and consider how burnout might feature in our future design challenges. I often think that UX and design thinking, whatever terms you're using in your organization, often what we're really about is problem framing. So taking a problem, breaking it apart and looking at it in a number of different ways. And it seems to me that these tools and techniques that we use every day should be able to apply to kind of burnout, the feelings of burnout, and the last year of kind of challenges we've all been facing. So I'm going to do that classic sort of presentation 101 thing of defining the problem. So what is burnout? Number one question. And, it's a term that I hear quite a lot from my team, and sometimes they mean it in terms of, feeling they've run out of energy, they're tired, or, they've got decision paralysis on something. So I thought I'd look up the kind of official definition as a starting point. And the World Health Organization defines it as a syndrome, a medical condition. And it's a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And that comes across in feelings of energy depletion, of exhaustion, of increasing mental distance between your job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism relating to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. This is a hard one to say, efficiency. So there's some really, clear definitions of this. And so with that in mind, I went out to my professional network and I put some surveys out via LinkedIn, via some of the other networks I'm part of, to kind of find out from UX practitioners and people within, within design, within tech, and the kind of like roles that sit around UX, whether any of these kind of definitions are things that they have felt. And I'm sure there are some statisticians or data scientists watching, so I will say that my survey is, people on my network. It is an imperfect sample, but hopefully it gives us a little idea at least. But yeah, I won't be publishing it. What I found really surprising was that 93% of the UX practitioners who responded to this survey reported at least one of those burnout characteristics, or having felt those burnout characteristics in the last 12 months. I think I was really surprised that it was that high, and I think in part this is due to kind of the nature of our work and how the pandemic has affected it this year. You know, most of us, according to the survey, have been mainly remote, and a lot of us weren't before. And I think what's really clear is that any sudden change or disruption to how we're working just highlights underlying problems and underlying issues. And as I've kind of delved into some of the things people are telling me on this survey, and, you know, in day-to-day business, what I'm really seeing is that a lot of these issues have always been there, but maybe have just really been exacerbated and highlighted by the pandemic, by going suddenly remote. So within that survey, I kind of asked people what about the last 12 months has been causing them, you know, the most discomfort, the most distress, and these were the results that I got back. So the number one was about balance and home and work commitments. And I think, you know, a big part of that is not regular remote working. You know, it's not regular in remote working to have your kids at home and have to homeschool them, as well as deliver work, and, you know, not be able to take them to soft play or whatever. So, you know, it's understandable that those things really come out as affecting people. The other things are about, you know, lack of face-to-face communication. That is something people miss. Managing their calendar, their working environment, a lack of communication, and video calls. So I think it's interesting that some of these refer to technology, but really what we've got are human problems, not technology problems. And I think you can summarize a lot of them within these sort of broader themes, which are about boundaries, about managing our time, and around communication. So, you know, boundaries, turning work off, balancing homeschooling, dog walking, cooking 3 times a day, cleaning up 3 times a day, the physical, geographical boundaries of all these tasks, and the hats we wear were very suddenly removed, and we're needing to find new ways to create and maintain those boundaries. With managing our time, you know, this isn't exclusive to our industry, but I do think that UX and design and a lot of the tech kind of industry and practitioners around me comprise of a lot of communication and collaboration, but also like balanced with deep focus work. And each of these things are kind of impacted by this sudden remote work. And I'll highlight sudden because obviously there are many very successfully operating remote companies who have been doing this for many years, but you know, they've created ways of working, evolved, iterated how they work over time. And so this kind of sudden ropey MVP version of working remotely is what we've often found ourselves in over the last year, and that's, I think, what causes more problems. Communication, I mean, everything's communication, isn't it? But as a theme, it's highly interlinked with all of these other things. And we also, you know, have the challenge of organizational communication, you know, for our professions in general. And in my experience, we often in these professions rely upon kind of coaching and shadowing and mentoring as our way of learning and progressing within an organization. So, you know, we talk a lot at Nomensa about the psychological strength of tackling problems with the power of 2, meaning 2 practitioners working closely together on the same problem. Managing this collaborative, deep focus is incredibly hard remotely, where you also have other pulls on your attention, you know, external pulls such as, you know, notifications, calls, emails, the kids, the dog. But also this year, I think what's harder to quantify is those internal attentional pulls of things like, you know, worrying about loved ones, worrying about health, financial impact of maybe having partners or family who are unable to work over the last year, political turmoil. And so, you know, there's a lot of things there that are really outside of the remit of work to necessarily fix, but they do have an impact, and they have an impact on everyone. So within this survey, as well as kind of asking, you know, tick box questions, which of these are hard, I also asked, you know, gave some space for some free form answers from people about what it is that's causing them to have these feelings. What is it that this last year has been most challenging? And the answers I got back were just really sweet and lovely, actually, and so social and so human, that they're not about, you know, oh, I hate Zoom calls, or I don't like this about my diary. It's, you know, I've got no joyous moments, that celebration, yeah, train gin or train wine, which is what I always have after a pitch. But it's those little rituals that we've all kind of built up to kind of cope with some of the stresses of our job or our industry, that suddenly kind of were missing for us. And so I thought it was really, really human that all of our joy is very much tied up with other people, kind of naturally, I suppose. And in fact, you know, when I asked what changes would improve your work experience most in the next 12 months, the number one answer was, with 64%, was socializing with our co-workers. That was the number one thing. And I think it's really important, I guess, to remember that, you know, we might improve processes, tools, time management, all of these sorts of things over the next year. But what we really need to do, and what organizations need to recognize, is that the return to work is also a return to socialization and to all of these things that make people happier, better performing, you know, all of these calming influences that just having a friendly conversation with a coworker can really, really help with. So it's always a tale of two halves with, you know, fallible, fickle people. And so the number two answer was leave me alone, which is really funny to me. But I think it's not being alone. It's about having uninterrupted time, and it's about having that deep focus, you know, being able to be free of interruptions, have focused time, and have the opportunity to move into like a focused and flow state with our work. And flow and deep working is, you know, I'm sure many of you have come across this, but it's so important to what we do. It's where creativity happens. It's when we shut off our kind of inner critic and we allow ourselves to really be creative, come up with things. And it's all about being able to focus on one thing, you know, being able to be entirely dedicated to the challenge that you're kind of trying to pick apart. And you know, in the book Hidden Brain, we talk about where these even brief interruptions, it doesn't matter kind of the length of those interruptions, whether it's 2 minutes or whether it's half an hour, it's the shift and the switch in focus that hurts our ability to do flow and deep working. So I think it's really, really interesting that those two areas of socializing and being human and being with people and being alone and being focused and being in deep work were the two things that most people wanted in the next 12 months to be able to kind of feel like they were out of this burnout kind of mindset. And when I looked at these things, I think it reminded me of this book, which is I can't recommend enough. I've put some links at the end, by the way, guys, so you can get links to all of these things later. But it's about this stress cycle that people exist within. Yeah, this book, Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski, is really, really fantastic at kind of explaining what this is, what the physiological impact of these things are, and understanding how our minds and how our bodies can be depleted by not closing down these stress cycles. So I'm gonna show you some things now. Again, I'm not an expert on this. I didn't write this, but I do find this incredibly useful when I'm framing problems in my design work or with my teams. I drew the lion, if you wanna be mad at anyone. So the first thing is that stress and stressors are not the same thing. So what I'm trying to represent here is a cycle of physiological and neurological activity. So the stressor, in this case, a lion, appears out of the bush, and your body goes into a process of fluctuation of neurological hormonal activity that diverts blood towards the muscles, reduces adrenaline and cortisol into your system, and gets you ready to do something about that lion, whether that's to run away, to try and fight it, to just lie down and hope for a quick end. Those are the kind of three responses you're going to be primed to take. Now, if we run away and we've successfully legged it over the plains, and we've outrun our lion, the lion is gone now. It's no longer there. The stressor of the lion is removed. That doesn't remove the physical response. The physical response is still happening. It's still in our bodies. And it takes some time to close that cycle and return us back to equilibrium of, not having all of these things rushing through our body. Now, it's unlikely that it's going to be a lion that causes you these things, but our brains don't really differentiate between a predator in a bush coming at us and, an upsetting meeting or phone call or a big pitch or doing a talk online. All of those things are stressors that cause the same stress physical response within our bodies. So that's great, but how do we close down those things? And there's some very specific actions that close down this stress cycle and return people to equilibrium. The number one thing is physical exertion. So not necessarily exercise, not necessarily jogging, but some kind of physical activity that raises our heart rate, that gets the blood pumping. That's one of the things that starts to kind of flush out this stress response from our body. Obviously, it's not possible in a meeting or doing a talk for Collaborate to start, doing some jumping jacks to kind of get that stress out of your system. So you have to kind of look at some of these other things. And the next one that really helps is just breathing. It's getting all that oxygen into your system and kind of starting to move all of these processes through your body. Breathing is, we all think we do it all the time, otherwise we'd be dead, right? But actually the science of breath and breath work is really, really fascinating. And if you've got time to look into it, I would really recommend it. Another one is laughter, and this is not laughter as in polite laughter when someone tells you a joke at work. Maybe it's like proper belly laughter with someone, most likely. Positive social interaction has a big effect, and that doesn't necessarily mean sitting and chatting with your best friend. It might mean literally just a friendly exchange with the lady at the coffee shop, or talking to a co-worker about what computer game you're playing or whatever. Those are really, really good for your stress response. Sometimes that's not going to cut it, and what you need is affection. So someone who is beloved and who is able to give you affection and kind of closeness, that can close down this. And there's some really specific stuff like a 20-second hug would probably do it for most people. Creative expression, which I think luckily in our industry is something that's really open to us. This is something that can really help. And maybe this is something we might harness to kind of close stress cycles, is having the opportunity to go and do something creative, whatever that is to you, drawing or coding or dancing or whatever you're into. And if all of that fails, a big old cry will do quite a lot for you and actually really help you to kind of reset some of those stress cycles. So I've talked about lions and stress, but what do we actually mean in the digital world, in our everyday world? So the working day lion is, you know, it's what I'm doing right now, to be honest. This is my work lion for the day, is that when the stressor of having finished this talk is gone, you know, I may still feel all of the physiological effects long after this. I think as well, remote presentations and remote pitches, if any of you have done them, are particularly hard because you're kind of working towards this deadline. You go and do your job, you do a really great job, you're like, you know, jazz hands everywhere, and then you shut off and you're left with your thoughts in your little room, and you know, you've got no one to kind of talk to about it, or, you know, no like post-pitch wines or post-pitch chats or walks, or, you know, all of those things. And so when I was doing this slide, actually, I don't know if you noticed, I'm in the same background as Chris's talk from earlier, and that's because I was like, yeah, actually, I don't really want to be just on my own at home. I think I'm going to come in and see people and be able to chat to them afterwards about how it went, and try and find that way to return to my natural equilibrium later. Obviously, I'm very lucky to be able to do that, in that, you know, I don't have any vulnerable family members. I've had 2 jabs at this point, and my workplace is COVID safe. Not everyone has got that available to them, but, you know, maybe there's other ways of being able to tap into some of those stress cycle closers in another way. So rather than, I'm not going to talk about myself the whole way, but like, one of the things that you might think about when you're thinking about this working day lion equivalent is what might be a digital lion, you know, a designed lion. Some of them, you know, come up quite a lot, I would say, this is an example. But what you might get with a design product is something like this, just a notification that kind of pops up first thing in the morning. Now we know it's just a notification, but our body is registering that as it's a threat to your safety, because it's, especially with money, it's a threat to your ability to, you know, sustain yourself or sustain your family. And so those things have a much bigger response than, you know, a notification saying, I don't know, you've got, you know, a new filter on Snapchat or whatever. And I think, you know, this example, and this is, I haven't put the actual bank, but this is taken from a real bank's system of notifications. But this experience is kind of triggering a lot of other stress responses. You know, it's got these all caps, which a lot of us read as kind of quite harsh. It's got a time limit added to it. You know, you've only got 24 hours to do something, because it's an unknown call to action. So, you know, if you're thinking about that cycle again, that's like piqued all of my physiological reactions to this trigger, and it's giving me nothing to kind of close it down again. So there's no closure of the digital experience, and our users there will be left needing to restore their natural equilibrium in another way. While we've kind of been talking about cycles and stress cycles, I don't know if any of you found it reminiscent of a model that was quite big in UX in kind of 2013, which is the Hooked model by Nir Eyal, in how to build habit-forming products. Are we, by using models like this, actually purposefully manipulating that stress cycle? I would suggest maybe. I think creating you know, a cool refresh animation on your app in 2013 to encourage people to have another look at the content, you know, seems pretty harmless now. But if you think about all of the experiences designed between 2013 and today that have maybe used this model and used this habit forming, you know, way of putting engagement out into the world, I think we can all agree that this is kind of colored by our experiences maybe of the last few years. And we might look at this and think, is this what we want to be doing? Do we want to be manipulating like physiological responses so that people interact with our products? Is that up to us? Should we be doing that? And I think it's a question we should all ask ourselves very deeply. It is a very good book, and I would say that Nir Eyal was mindful of this, and in there he did put this manipulation matrix, which would let people decide whether this was the right model to use. And, you know, it was, does it materially improve the user's life? And would the maker themselves use it? So if both of those things are a tick, you might go, great, you're a facilitator. Yes, we're trying to change habits, but, you know, we're doing it in a nice way, and we're doing it to kind of help people. I'm not sure now, given all that we know since 2013, whether we would still think that this was enough to stop users maybe having effects they couldn't have possibly predicted as well. I think that's the thing, that many people might think they're improving your life. I mean, you know, the guy who owns Snapchat started by creating a highly addictive Bible app that would get you Bible verses every single day and kind of keep you coming back. Now, his view is that he's materially improving people's lives by giving them access to Bible study and stuff. You know, other people's point of view might be that that's not materially improving people's lives, so or some people's lives. So, you know, we have to be mindful of these things and wonder if it's really up to us whether we get people's attention as the finite resource that it is. Is it ours to take? One of the things that we talk about a lot is around accessibility and the difference between permanent, temporary, and situational accessibility needs. Now, I don't know if you guys have come across it, but you know, the idea is that you may have someone with a permanent injury, for example, having one arm, and changes you make to your products to suit that permanent injury also actually have a really positive impact on people with a temporary you know, injury, for example, on their arm, or a situational instance of like having a baby in your arm and only having one hand. But the idea is that by designing for permanent, temporary, and situational accessibility needs, actually we create better products for a whole range of people. And I'm wondering whether we might design for burnout as a situational or hopefully temporary state that people may be going in. Can you use burnout as a stimulus in your design thinking workshops? For example, I don't know if you guys do crazy eights, ideation, it's sketching, whatever. But the idea that you might go, looking at my product through the lens of someone with mental depletion and exhaustion, what changes might I make so that that experience is better for someone who is experiencing the symptoms of burnout? And by doing that, we may just create better, simpler, friendlier products for everyone, which might decrease the amount of burnout we see in kind of digital professionals. So I would say that it might be interesting to take these kind of depletion, exhaustion, negativism, reduced efficacy, and lessening the stress response, and use those as starting points to improve upon or, you know, create new products, ideas, experiences. So I talked about, you know, lessening that stress response and hopefully closing some of these digital cycles. So, you know, some of the things that I've been doing to start to look at this and see whether this is something I can include in some of my design work is look at how many decisions we're asking of people. You know, sometimes I might joke that I've only got maybe 10 good decisions in me a day. And if we're kind of asking 3 of them to be about whether I want to, you know, change my weather app around or not, that's kind of asking a lot of people. You know, is this definitely a decision that needs to be made? If it is, let's keep it clear, let's keep it minimal, and serve it up to someone. Another, like going back to that kind of banking example, is around closing down actions. So after an action has been performed, can we use microcopy or design or something to assure that there's nothing else needed, the action's been done correctly, you can like stand down, you can relax, this has been sorted. Another one is around notifications, messages. I think, you know, when we talked about interruption, notifications, messages, these are the things that are kind of pulling people out of these states that they're obviously desiring, this ability to focus, this ability to kind of have just one thing going on. So if you're sending notifications or messages, you know, one, let's look at that kind of frequency, that time of day. Are we sending 5 out in quick succession? Or, you know, think about the ecosystem of someone's device. They've probably got, you know, 20 or 30 apps sending them notifications. When do they come in? Do we want them to be, you know, maybe find a quiet time to send this one? Or is it important to do it like first thing? You know, is that how we want to get people to interact with our devices? Like bleary-eyed first thing, threatening message? That's not for me. Yeah, make sure they are unambiguous, non-threatening, that it's really clear what's going on. Personalization, using someone's name. These are all things we can do to soften some of that stuff. This one, I maybe I'm being mean, but no one wants to do your survey. I think that's really, we should just accept it. People don't want to do surveys, and they certainly don't want to be, you know, have a stressful financial interaction and then be put through to a survey. You're not going to, if nothing else, you're not going to get good results. And really just, you know, again, let's look at our users' time and what they're going through, and just have a little bit of thought about whether that's the right thing for them. And the final one is just a kind of general point about aftercare. If we're asking our clients to go through, you know, a slightly stressful situation, or, you know, a difficult interaction with us, provide that aftercare and follow-up and reassurance. That experience may have been really difficult for someone, and coming back round and going, thank you for doing it, or everything is fine now, don't worry, we've taken care of it all. These are really important things to do for people. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty in people who have in a high stress mindset, and people will assume the worst of an experience. And you know, as an example, in a previous organization I worked in, I had someone who came to me quite regularly to say that they were unhappy with how someone was communicating with them. They said that every time they sent them work, they were getting emails back disparaging their work and kind of, you know, questioning whether they were very good at it and things like that. And when I dug into it, what I found was that the person who was kind of signing off someone's work, their name began with O, and they were signing off their emails with a letter O, just, you know, shorthand. And this person was sure that that O was an unhappy face, and that they were putting it on there in particular to tell them that their work was no good, and that they were, you know, not up to the job. So, you know, people really will read a lot into situations when they're in a high stress state that can make them, you know, keep that stress cycle going. And maybe there's something we can do to just smooth that down and be unambiguous about our communication. So in summary for this, how might we design for burnout? Well, number one, let's not remake Clippy for burnout. If that idea comes at you, someone suggests it, you know, just shut that one down, I would say. For me, it's about respecting boundaries, our users' boundaries. It's about respecting that user's time, communicating really clearly of what we want, and removing that stress as well as the stressor as much as we possibly can, closing that cycle, not leaving people in that kind of limbo. And in that survey I talked about earlier, I did ask people if they were doing anything with their products at the moment to kind of improve the experience for people who might be in a stressful situation. And I got some really lovely examples back that people were happy to share with me, such as, you know, they were spending time creating shorter forms, making clearer thank you messages, things like making sure that services are empathetic and that users need support and info thereafter, getting it to them as quickly as possible, as well as some of the other stuff we're doing, which is making sure that vulnerable people in COVID have the help and support they need, and that people with maybe lower access to digital channels still have ways of effectively, accessing services. So that's about products, but can UX fix my burnout, your burnout, one's burnout? What practices from UX can we use on ourselves? Can we preserve our attention as a precious resource? And can we close the stress cycles that sit around us? Our workflow is personal workflow is a product like other products. And if it's dysfunctional, you need to prioritize making it better, right? Another thing, this is a quote from someone much cleverer than me, but I'll put it in the notes. But if a project or a feature is going off the rails, there are two options. You increase the timeline or you reduce the scope. Hopefully that resonates with you in the work that you're doing. UX often needs to make the best possible solutions with limited resources available. And we can also kind of look at that human behavior and make things that meet people where they are, rather than try and enforce new structures. So, with that in mind, I thought I would share, just so you've got a few things that maybe will work, some tips that I have been using over the last year to try and reduce my scope in terms of having less of that interruption and more of that deep focus time or connection time. So the first thing that I like to do, and I do this on paper in the morning, is to draw out the 8-hour chunks of my day, and then over a period of time, you may want to just monitor, actually, what am I doing with these hours? Where are they? I do this offline because I don't want to be interrupted by the first emails of the day or the first messages on Teams of the day. It's an opportunity to be slow and to be deliberate and actually, draw these out by hand. Obviously, you can use digital tools to do this, but personally, I find it really, really useful to take it off screen. So the idea is that you might monitor your work for a few weeks and see, of those 8-hour blocks, what are they being used for? I've put them in, this is my day, this doesn't have to be your day, but these are the kind of broad buckets that are important to me and that I want to kind of categorize things into. Straight away, and I'm sure it's familiar to many of you, that the thing that was happening for me was that meetings and quick calls and check-ins and stand-ups were taking up over half of my day every day, which left me with like some very small slivers of time to, collaborate effectively with people, to focus on some of that deep work. And for me, who, with a team and people who I'm looking after, I want to have that connection time as well, to be able to check in with people, really check in with people. It's not a meeting. It is, something genuine and useful. So after doing this for a few weeks, what I then did is start to think about, well, what would my ideal day look like? And then we can start to design what that looks like. So for me, and yours may vary, my day was really about finding that balance between meetings that were necessary, collaboration that was more intentionful, focus for those tasks and that thinking that I need to do in my work, and connection for members of my team who may need support, especially over the last year, or may need to kind of connect and understand what's going on with them. So the idea is really to just time box your day and decide what happens within those time boxes. Once you kind of start doing this and noting actual activities in the day, you might also find some other patterns. So for example, I found in my own energy levels that I prefer to get high energy collaborative work out in the mornings when I'm feeling sociable. And then in the afternoons, I would like to retreat and do my deep focus work and maybe a couple of one-on-ones in a quieter space. You may find that you're the exact opposite of that or something completely different. But I think until we start monitoring it and kind of trying to understand what it is we're doing on a day-to-day basis, we might not notice these patterns and have an opportunity to make them better. Another tool that we use a lot in UX, or I know I do, is kind of mapping features or mapping changes based on the value versus the complexity. So how high value is this feature on a, let's say, an app, versus how complex, how difficult is it going to be to build? And generally what you'll see is that there's some high value, low complexity things that you're like, great, well, I'll do that straight away because that's going to really have a good impact. And then there's high value, high complexity things that are still worth doing, but you might need to work towards over, you know, a few weeks or a few months. What I noticed, you know, with meetings in particular, is that they sort of fall into this mid zone of like, meh, you know, they're kind of, I need them, like they're kind of, there's value because there's something in there I need to know, but some parts of it are not really about me. And so they don't hold my attention, they don't hold my engagement. And they're not like super, super hard, but they do take my time, they do take my energy. And what I also find is that over the course of a day, and the more kind of meetings that are coming in, the lower value and the more complexity they seem to be. It seems harder to be, you know, looking interested on Zoom for another hour. You know, if you were in an office and someone was following you around into your meetings and holding a mirror in your face, so you had to look at yourself as you explain something complicated 7 hours a day, you would ask them to stop it. And yet we've become used to this in Zoom and in you know, Teams and other fatigue-inducing kind of tools. So how are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to stop this kind of like slow, you know, descent into low value and low and high complexity meetings? There's two options, right? The options are make them more valuable or make them less complex. And, you know, I think you need to respect your time and the attention that you have as a finite resource, and consider what activities are going to be high value for you. So as an example, you know, something that would be high value for me would be making meetings into more co-creation, problem solving, brainstorming, sessions where there's energy, where there's things that we need to do. And that's going to keep my engagement. That's going to make me go to that, you know, lovely meeting because that's going to be really good. Some stuff it just needs doing, right? So make it less complex. You've probably find that your meeting tools are set up to a default of half an hour. You know, question that. Could you get this done in 15 minutes? Could you get it done in 7 minutes? Shorten those default times. Another thing to do is to intro a purpose and what decisions are needed within this meeting, and to circulate that ahead of time, so that people can come with the answers, or maybe they'll email you back the answers ahead of time and you don't need to have the meeting anymore. But using that space to both tell people the problem and expect an answer to that problem in the same slot is, you know, no real burnout inducing kind of feeling, especially when people are having a lot of these. Another thing you might do to reduce that complexity is to allow people to just come and do their bit. Usually there's a bit that they're important for. And another thing which, you know, I considered for today, by the way, I've minimized it, but it's don't require cameras on all the time. If things are task-based, not face-based, we don't really need to have cameras on. And it's not about that people might not want to see you. It's usually people don't want to see themselves again at the end of a day. And so, you know, be, I guess, mindful of how people feel and whether they are required, you know, kick back, imagine it's a podcast, you know, relax. It will kind of maybe help get through some of these things with that, without feeling like it's too much to handle, it's too complex for you to do 7 times in one day. So, you know, the question was, can UX fix burnout? I think it's exactly the same themes. Yeah, you need to respect your boundaries, respect your time, communicate your needs really clearly, and remove your stress as well as your stressor and close your cycle. Now, I don't want to go full self-help because, you know, I'm not an expert, but there's no point in fixing our personal workflows if there is an organizational and structural change that supports it. Building, resilience, recovery is great, but we have to deal with structural systems that cause it. And I think that organizations need to stop duplicating office-centric practices and shift to a human-centric model. You know, people are finding it hard to come back into, you know, if I come back into the office, will I still be on video calls 7 hours a day? We need to work out what activities we're actually asking people to do. And from the survey, I asked people about what they would like, you know, their future working to look like. And some people said things like, you know, the office needs to be a no hands-on space. It's about a community space for learning, sharing, creating fast ideas, and then taking them home for that heads down, like rollout type activity. I think that's really, really great. I think one of the things that many organizations are trying to do is recreate that kind of innovation by chance thing, where you're sort of working away and someone over there goes, oh yeah, I'm making an app to shell peanuts. And you're like, I did that, I've shelled peanuts. And you kind of get that chance innovation or chance knowledge share. I don't think that is reasonable as a future for office spaces, that innovation by chance isn't going to cut it. And that as UX professionals and practitioners, we have the opportunity to create innovation by design. So this is a Gartner survey, so they talk to many more people than me. They were saying that progressive organizations are relying less on innovation by chance and more on innovation by design. You know, less on that water cooler moment that maybe people are trying to recreate, and more on a systematic approach to innovation. And that's kind of, I think, what UX professionals are very good at, of systematically taking apart that problem, reframing it, and innovating by looking at it through a new lens. And maybe some of the tools of burnout, of respecting people's time, are some of the things that might help us do that. But we can't do that overheard in the office type knowledge sharing. If we're going to do that, we have to have open communication. We have to have sharing by default. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to do this. We're not going to be able to innovate by design. Another thing, and this is, I know, incredibly difficult. I'm sure some people maybe in the comments will have some thoughts on this, but we need to allow time for unstructured work, unstructured thought. I mean, the psychological term for it is the unconscious recombination of thought processes, right? We're churning on a problem for a few days, and then we go for a walk, we go and have a look at the leaves and the flowers, and there it is, that shower moment. It's not chance. That can be designed, creating unstructured time to do that. And a lovely term that I looked at, which was soft fascination, is the number one way of having that kind of moment of thought, and also closing down some of those stress cycles, is getting out, getting into nature maybe, or getting into spaces that resonate with you, that might be different for you, and having that soft fascination time. Ultimately, what we want to do is create human-centered innovation, you know, things that are around not geographical spaces, but around people and what they need and what they're doing. And just, I think, to end on, you know, we can redesign processes and tools, but the biggest shortcut to change is trust. If we can trust the people we work with, if we can trust our co-workers and trust those who we have on our teams, that's a shortcut to a very long, convoluted process. We just trust they're going to do the right thing. And so trust is really, really important to make all of these things happen. And that's, I think, what organizations may need to want to think about in the next year or so. So I did say earlier, I'm not an expert. These people are experts. And so if any of this is resonating with you, if you want to think about, either your mental health or a loved one's mental health or a co-worker's mental health. There's a lot of free resources, and we'll provide some links as well after this if you want to take a look at them. And then a couple of books here that I've read that I found incredibly useful. Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski, and Cal Newport's Deep Work. Both of those are really, really useful, I think, at designing your day and designing your time. Cool. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, whether you're here live or you're watching later. And I think now we've got a bit of time for questions. I think.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. I love the concept of a digital lion. Well, I don't like actual digital lions, but I love the analogy. I also definitely miss train gins as well. So if anyone has any questions, please submit them either in the chat or in the Q&A box. Hannah, you mentioned kind of the example of, that threatening overdraft notification from your bank that kind of triggers a stress response. And it's kind of, it's obviously kind of there to kind of make you take action. Do you think, there is kind of a place for a digital lion, or do you think that's kind of not really ethical to make people feel stressed?
No, I mean, I think there's some things we need people to take action, and it's not a problem to ask people strongly to take action if it's needed. I think the thing is about that aftercare, and if we're going to open up that cycle of stress by asking people to do something, then it's also making sure that we take the time to close it back down and make sure that we're being really clear that the action they have completed has done the job, that they don't need to do anything else, and thank you as well. That's nice to say.
Awesome, thank you. And Bob, I mean, we've got a question here from Bob, which I think you kind of covered off kind of after the question was asked, but I think it'd be great to kind of hear a bit more. So Bob asked kind of, should more effort be used for aids for burnout rather than kind of restructuring the working environment, which you did kind of touch on. Do you think it's, it's kind of a bit of both, I suppose, isn't it? And do you think organizations should kind of support and provide aids for burnout as well?
Yeah. So I think it has to be both. In a perfect world, well, it would be a perfect world, and the structures would change to a point where no one felt this way. But equally, everyone's different, and different things affect different people. I think also, I talked about lions and digital lions and stress things, but some of the things that stress people out are large and hidden, and they're structural inequality, and they're poverty, and they're all kinds of things that we can't just get rid of that stressor. And so you do need some kind of help in being able to cope with a world that is imperfect and that does have stressors around. But equally, I think it's equally, if not more important, to spend time looking at those structural systems and innovating by design, as in take them apart. What if we changed this? What if this was different? What if we didn't have this anymore? Which I think, COVID has really made us look at, right? A lot of us would have said it's not possible to do my job 100% remote a year and a half ago, and maybe not in the best way possible, but we've kind of gone, oh, actually, a lot of the things I thought were true and maybe not true, and that's great. That gives us an opportunity to change things or look at them differently, at least.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got next question here from Stuart. Hi, Stuart. Stuart says, thanks for a great talk. Feels like I can really take some of these points away and get some real change within my team. He asks, when you break down your day, do you try and chunk together the different tasks, i.e. meetings, focus, etc., or do you jump around?
For me, I try and time box those things because again, I'm especially with deep focus, I'm trying to find that decent period of time without interruptions. So for me, I am trying to time box them. I mean, I've been iterating on this for a year, and there's some things have worked, some things haven't. I put in blocked out time in my diary like I'm not available at this time, and that doesn't always work. What I found, this is quite sneaky, so what I found worked was that I putting in half an hour and then every week just increasing it by like 5 or 10 minutes, blocking out that time, and I've gradually taught some people who I work with that those times are no longer available to them.
You just dropped yourself right in it there, haven't you?
Yeah, there are 2 or 3 trusted people who know that I am actually available in those times.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got time for just one more. This is a great question. And this question asks, how can you best support a colleague or a friend going through burnout?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Well, I think one, accept that you might not be an expert and that they might need to go and see an expert. That there's lots of talking therapies available that really do help with all of these things. But I think you could at least take a look at some of these types of activities, and you could help your friend with these. Just doing some non-focused, going for a walk, taking a cup of tea out to the woods, borrowing someone's dog, borrowing a cat for the weekend, or, going and doing some dancing or running or whatever it is that works for you. And obviously, I know there's some people, myself included, that when you're like, oh, just go get some exercise, I'm like, absolutely not. So, then you need to find the thing that's going to work for you. I've been sat on a stationary bicycle playing Witcher 3 in my garage. That's working for me. I don't know, maybe anyone else wants to have a go at that. I would recommend it. But yeah, these things are all human things. And I think that's really the key, isn't it? That the stress cycle is a human problem. And actually, most of the things that fix it are human interaction and just some kindness and fun and laughter and things that are really, really difficult, I know, in lockdown. So I think it's lots of ways you can help your friend if they are feeling burnt out. But, I'm going to finish it structural. Maybe they're in a job they hate. Maybe that's why they're burnt out. So you have to kind of also support people to change their structural situation. You can't just put plasters on it forever. At some point you need to address those things. And I think, being clear about your boundaries and what you need will help you to do that, to say, actually, this isn't working for me. This isn't going to make me happy. Can I change this in my current situation, or do I need to change my situation? That's ultimately what you're going to have to think about.
Brilliant.
That's the answer. I don't know.
Cool, thank you. I think that's just about all we've got time for. Getting lots of love in the chat. People saying what a great talk it was. So yeah, thank you. And thanks to everyone that tuned in. Our next session today is at 3 p.m. UK time, so just over an hour. It's from Jim Kalbach, who is Chief Evangelist at Mural, and his talk is Jobs to be Done, a Design Language for Collaboration. There is still time to sign up. Grab your free pass over on Eventbrite or on the Collaborate website. And yeah, hopefully see some of you there then. Cool. Thanks again, Hannah.
No worries, man.
Cool. Thank you.